Welcome back to the Chattable podcast, where we learn real English in real life and have fun and be proud.
Yeah, it is really great to be back. And today we're doing something just a little bit different, aren't we?
We sure are. I mean, usually we take a huge topic and sort of tear it apart, but today, for this episode, we are zooming in. We are looking at the specific language of business. And honestly, I was surprised by how physical it all is.
It really is, yeah.
I mean, you think of business English and you think of, spreadsheets and synergy and quarterly returns, kind of the boring stuff. But looking at the source material for today, the words we actually use in the boardroom are about body parts and kitchen science and, weirdly enough, romance.
It does sound a bit like a soap opera when you put it that way. But you're right. The words we're unpacking today, elbow, temper, and woo away, they really highlight how we borrow concepts from our physical lives, our cooking, and our love lives to explain these complex corporate maneuvers.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, here is the roadmap for this episode. We have 3 key phrases to master. First up is elbow. And this is all about fighting for space.
Right. It's about how to be aggressive when the room is already full.
Then we're going to look at temper, which sounds like, getting angry, but it's actually about chocolate and steel and managing disappointment.
A very useful skill in the current economy, I might add.
Definitely. And finally, we're going to talk about woo away, the very romantic art of stealing employees.
Which happens a lot more than you'd think in the corporate world.
So let's treat this as a proper episode. We want you to walk away not just knowing these words, but really understanding the vibe behind them, the actual feeling of the language. Shall we dive into the first one?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay. Word number 1 is elbow. Now, obviously, we know what an elbow is. Literally, it's that pointy, bony thing right in the middle of your arm.
Soft joint, yeah.
The sharp joint. But we're looking at a specific sentence here from the source material. It says, Samsung's innovation has helped itself elbow into a smartphone market dominated by Apple in the early years.
That is a really great example to start with because it sets the scene perfectly for what this word actually does.
So help us visualize this. We aren't talking about Samsung literally hitting Apple executives with their arm. What is the action here?
Well, think about a crowded subway car or a packed concert. You're trying to get to the front or just find a place to stand, really. There is no open space. The space is completely occupied. So what do? You stick your elbows out?
You sort of make yourself wider.
Exactly. You use that sharp joint to physically push people aside to create a gap. It's not polite, it's forceful. And that is exactly what this means in business.
So context is key here. You wouldn't elbow into an empty room.
Precisely. That is the most important distinction for our listeners. If a market is new and open, you just enter it, you walk in. But if you are using the word elbow, you are implying that the market is already full.
There's no space.
Right. The incumbents, the competitors, they're already there taking up all the air in the room. You have to force them to move to make space for you.
I love that distinction. It implies resistance.
It does. It implies a real struggle.
Let's unpack that Samsung example a bit more. The source mentions Samsung's innovation helped it elbow into a market dominated by Apple. If we go back to the early 2010s, Apple was the king.
The absolute king.
Wow.
The iPhone was the standard. Everyone else was just playing catch up.
And the market felt full, didn't it? It felt like everyone had an iPhone. So Samsung couldn't just politely knock on the door and ask for some market share.
No, politeness would have gotten them absolutely nowhere. They had to be disruptive. They had to use their elbows. And in this case, the elbow was the phabla. Do you remember those massive screens?
Oh, I do. I remember thinking they looked completely ridiculous at first, like people holding a flat screen TV to their ear.
Exactly. Steve Jobs famously hated them. He thought a phone should fit comfortably in one hand. But Samsung used that big screen as a physical wedge. They jammed it into the market. They basically said, we are going to be big, we are going to be different, and we are going to force you to look at us.
And it worked. They carved out space.
They did. And eventually they forced Apple to move too. Apple had to start making bigger phones. That is the true power of the elbow.
Right.
You don't just take space, you force the other people in the room to shift their stance.
We have another really juicy example in the notes here. This one is about music streaming. The source mentions when Spotify was dominating the music streaming industry, Tim Cook and Apple had to really elbow their way into the market with Apple Music.
This is a classic case. Think about the timeline here. Spotify was already the cool kid at the party. Everyone had Spotify. They owned the room.
Right. They were the default.
Apple was late. Fashionably late, maybe, but late. If they had just quietly released an app, they might have been completely ignored. They had to elbow their way in.
And how does a massive company like Apple use its elbows?
Well, in the corporate world, elbows usually equate to money and influence. They use their massive cash reserves. They pre-installed the app on millions of iPhones.
Which is a huge advantage.
It's a very sharp elbow, by the way. And they secured exclusive deals with artists. They pushed the competition aside to say, we are standing here now.
It's aggressive.
It has to be. You're taking someone else's territory.
I want to linger on that image of the pre-installed app. That really is the digital equivalent of shoving someone, isn't it?
It is. Imagine you are at a crowded table and someone just walks up and sits right on your lap. That is essentially what Apple did. They put their icon right on the screen where Spotify wanted to be. They used their ecosystem advantage as a physical force to displace the competitor.
So elbowing isn't always fair?
No, it's rarely fair in the playground sense. It's about leverage. It's about using whatever strength you have, whether that's innovation like Samsung or platform power like Apple, to make room where there wasn't any.
I have another example here that I absolutely love because it's about one of my favorite people, Rihanna.
Oh, yes. The Fenty example.
The source says, the fashion industry is notoriously difficult to enter, but Rihanna elbowed her way in by launching a makeup line that forced everyone else to change their standards.
This is a slightly different shade of the word elbow, and I think it's fascinating to look at.
How so?
With Apple, it was about pure market share. With Rihanna, it was about disruption. The fashion and beauty industry was a very crowded room, but it was a room full of people who all looked the same. They were catering to a very specific, limited range of skin tones.
Right, it was a very closed club.
Exactly. And Rihanna didn't just ask to join the club. She elbowed her way in by bringing something that forced the people already in the room to shift their position. She launched Fenty Beauty with 40 shades of foundation.
Which was completely unheard of at the time.
Unheard of. And that was her elbow. She forced the incumbents, the L'Oreals, the Estee Lauders, to move. They had to scramble to expand their own ranges just to keep up. She made space for herself by proving that the old way wasn't covering the whole room.
So elbowing isn't just about shoving people, it's about making your presence felt in a way that others simply cannot ignore.
Yes. It's asserting your right to be in a space that didn't invite you.
I like that phrase. Asserting your right to be in a space that didn't invite you. That is a powerful image. So for our listeners, if you're describing a company entering a tough, highly competitive market, don't just say they entered. Say they elbowed their way in. It gives it so much more drama.
It adds the narrative of the fight to the sentence.
And it really tells the listener that this wasn't easy. It wasn't a walk in the park. It was a struggle for territory.
Exactly. It's active, not passive.
Okay, let's move from the physical fight to something a little more scientific. Or maybe culinary.
A bit of both, actually.
Our second word is temper. Now, I have to be honest, when I hear temper, I usually think of losing my temper. You know, getting angry, throwing things.
Which is incredibly common. But in business English, specifically as a verb, it actually means almost the exact opposite.
Let's look at the target sentence. Consumers have tempered their spending due to inflation and economic uncertainty.
Right. So here, nobody is getting angry. They are pulling back.
Why do we use this word? Where does it actually come from?
This is where we get to geek out a little bit on the origins of language.
Yeah.
The word comes from metallurgy, which is working with metals, and cooking.
Okay, explain the metal one first. I'm imagining a blacksmith.
So think about steel. If you just heat steel up to a crazy temperature and let it cool naturally, or if you cool it too fast, it can be very brittle. It breaks easily. To temper steel means to heat it and then carefully, slowly cool it down or reheat it to a specific point. This process removes the brittleness. It balances the metal.
So it makes it stronger by making it less extreme.
Exactly. It creates stability. Think of a sword. If the metal is too hard, it shatters when you hit a shield. If it's too soft, it just bends. Tempering finds that perfect middle ground where it is tough but flexible.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about the kitchen? You mentioned cooking.
Yes. Have you ever watched a baking show where they talk about tempering chocolate?
Oh, sure. If you don't do it right, the chocolate looks dull and chalky and kind of gross.
Right. That's called the bloom. Tempering chocolate is about controlling the heat, bringing it into a stable state so it's smooth and shiny and has that really nice snap when you break it. In both cases, the steel and the chocolate, the core meaning is about bringing extreme elements into balance, softening the extremes.
That is a fascinating background for a business word. So when we use it in the corporate world, what are we balancing?
Usually we're balancing emotions or actions that are getting too hot.
Too intense.
Yes. In business, temper is the professional, gentle way of saying calm down, or let's be realistic. You'll almost always hear it paired with specific words. We call these collocations.
What are the big ones? The ones you hear all the time.
You temper spending. You temper enthusiasm. And the absolute biggest one is you temper expectations.
Managing expectations is the buzzword everyone knows, but tempering expectations sounds much more poetic.
It's also more precise. It implies that the expectations are currently too high. They're too hot, like that untempered steel, and we need to cool them down before they shatter.
We have a great example here involving Target, the retail giant. After seeing the disappointing holiday sales numbers, CEO Brian Cornell had to temper investor expectations for Target's upcoming year.
This is classic CEO damage control right here.
Break that down for us. Why did they do that? Why not just wait and see?
Well, imagine if the CEO didn't say anything. Investors are expecting record profits because maybe the market is doing well generally. They are hot with excitement. Then the numbers come out and they are shockingly low. The sudden change would cause the stock price to crash. The reaction would be brittle.
Ah, I see. It would shatter.
By tempering expectations early, the CEO is slowly cooling the investors down. They're saying, hey guys, it's not going to be amazing. It's going to be okay, but let's calm down a bit. So when the mediocre news finally comes, the market is already stable. It doesn't break.
That makes so much sense. You are preventing the crash by lowering the temperature in the room ahead of time.
Exactly. It's all about avoiding the shock. If you let people run hot with their imagination, the harsh reality will break them. Tempering brings them back to earth gently.
There's another example here from the source that I think everyone can relate to. It's about Elon Musk.
The undisputed king of untempered expectations.
The sentence is, Elon Musk makes massive promises about self-driving cars, but his engineers usually have to temper those timelines when talking to the press.
This is such a common dynamic in the tech world. You have the visionary and the engineer.
The visionary brings the heat.
The visionary is the blast furnace. We will be on Mars in 2 years. The car will drive itself across the country next month. That is extreme heat. It gets people excited, sure, it gets funding, but it is highly volatile.
And the engineers, what is their role in this metaphor?
They are the cooling process. They have to step in and say, okay, that is a great goal, but realistically, let's temper that. Let's look at the physics and the code. Maybe it's 5 years, not next month.
So they aren't stopping the project. They are just making it realistic.
Correct. And that's the key takeaway for temper. It doesn't mean stop. It doesn't mean cancel. It means moderate. It means bringing the intensity down to a sustainable level.
I love that image, the engineer standing there with a bucket of cold water, just trying to keep the steel from cracking while the CEO blows fire.
That is basically the job description of a chief technology officer.
So we have elbowed our way into the room. We have tempered the excitement. Now let's get a little romantic.
Yeah.
Our third word is woo away. And I have to say, woo is such a funny word to say out loud.
It's delightful. It feels very old world.
It feels like something straight from a Shakespeare play. I am here to woo the fair maiden.
It is very old-fashioned. Historically, to woo someone meant to court them. You were trying to win their affection, usually with the explicit goal of marriage.
We are talking flowers, sonnets, standing under a balcony, singing at night.
All of that. It implies a dedicated pursuit. You are trying to convince someone that you are the best partner for them. You are selling yourself as the perfect match.
But the phrase we are looking at from our business source isn't just woo, it's woo away.
That away is the crucial part of the phrase.
The target sentence is, Apple is making a higher offer for the chip company to woo it away from its current offers.
So in the romantic sense, this isn't just courting a single, unattached person. This is actively stealing someone's girlfriend or boyfriend.
Scandalous.
It is. You are convincing them to leave their current partner because you are supposedly better. And modern business has completely stolen this metaphor.
It really has. We use it all the time now. But instead of flowers and chocolates, what are the tools of courtship in business?
Well, the flowers are usually stock options. The poems are massive contracts and signing bonuses. And marriage is an employment contract or a full-on acquisition deal.
It's funny how we use such a soft, romantic word for what is actually pretty ruthless behavior.
It is entirely ruthless. We often call it poaching, which is an illegal hunting term. But woo away focuses on the seduction aspect of it. It implies that the person or the company you are targeting is very valuable. You don't woo just anyone.
Right. You don't woo an entry-level intern. You just post a job listing and hire them.
Exactly. You woo the rock stars, the people who are incredibly hard to get, the people who are already happy where they are, and you have to convince them they'd be happier with you.
We have a great example here involving Microsoft and Google. Microsoft successfully wooed away Mustafa Suleyman and several top AI researchers from Google to run their new consumer AI division.
This is a perfect example of high-stakes wooing. Mustafa Suleyman is a massive name in AI. He was at Google DeepMind. He was comfortable. He had a very good marriage with Google, so to speak.
So Microsoft had to really turn on the charm.
They had to offer something fundamentally better than what he already had. That probably involved not just money, but freedom. The ability to run his own division, the computing resources. They had to romance him into leaving a very good situation.
And it emphasizes the value of the talent. In the AI war right now, the researchers are the ultimate prize.
They are the bells of the ball. Everyone is trying to woo them. The scarcity makes the courtship that much more intense.
There's another example from the entertainment world that I think perfectly illustrates the dowry aspect of this.
The Shonda Rhimes deal.
Yes. Netflix managed to woo Shonda Rhimes away from her longtime home at ABC by offering her total creative control and a massive payday.
Think about that relationship for a second. Shonda Rhimes was ABC royalty. Grey's Anatomy, Scandal. She basically owned Thursday nights on that network. It was a very long, very stable marriage.
15 years,
I think.
So how do you break that up? How do you woo her away from a sure thing?
Netflix offered her something ABC structurally couldn't. Total creative control. No network censors, no ad breaks. Just make whatever you want. That was the bouquet of red roses that won her heart.
And the massive payday didn't hurt.
The diamonds helped, yes. But notice how woo away captures the effort involved. Netflix had to really work for it. They had to persuade her over time.
So when our listeners are using this phrase in their own conversations, they should reserve woo away for high-value targets.
Yes. Use it when there is a real sense of persuasion. When you have to actively convince someone to switch sides. It adds a layer of sophistication and strategy to the standard hiring or buying process.
It paints a picture. It's not just a dry transaction. It's a dramatic courtship.
With a very, very expensive prenup.
Exactly. So we have covered a lot of ground here today. We have gone from the physical violence of the elbow to the scientific stability of the temper to the romance of the woo.
It has been quite a journey through the dictionary.
Let's do a quick recap for everyone before we wrap up this episode.
Sure. So, elbow. Use this when you are talking about intense market competition. Specifically, entering a market that is already crowded. You are pushing the incumbents aside to make room for yourself.
Think Samsung versus Apple, or Rihanna versus the traditional beauty industry.
Then we have temper. Use this when you need to talk about moderation. It's about cooling down hot emotions or unrealistic goals. You temper expectations, you temper spending, you temper enthusiasm.
Think of the practical engineer calming down the visionary CEO before the investors panic.
And finally, woo away. Use this for high-level recruitment or corporate acquisitions. It's about using charm, money, and incentives to persuade a valuable person or company to leave their current situation and join yours.
The fine art of corporate seduction.
Indeed.
Now, before we sign off, I know you always like to leave us with a bit of a deeper thought. What is the provocative thought for this episode based on our source material?
Well, as we were talking through these examples, I was thinking about how all three of these words are essentially euphemisms.
Euphemisms? How so?
They are metaphors that soften reality. Business is often deeply aggressive and ruthless. But we don't like to sound that way in polite company. Elbowing sounds a lot better than shoving or forcing. Wooing sounds a lot nicer than stealing or poaching. And tempering sounds much more professional than disappointing or failing to meet goals.
That is very true. Saying, I am tempering your expectations sounds way better than saying I am about to severely disappoint you.
Exactly. It softens the blow. So my thought for the listener is this. Pay attention to these metaphors. When you hear a CEO or a manager use these words, ask yourself, what is the raw, actual action they are describing? Because often, the prettier the word, the tougher the reality underneath.
That is a brilliant perspective to end on. Business language really is a mask sometimes.
It is a very well-crafted mask.
Well, on that note, we hope you go out there and woo some success in your own lives.
Or at least temper your fear of English vocabulary.
Exactly. Thanks for listening to this episode of Chattable. We'll see you next time.